I just want to welcome everybody to this session on maximising educational impact with prompting theory and genAI tool. So this is part of our professional development week, July 25. Can I just ask that people do mute their mics, please? Thank you. Today we're going to discover how to apply prompting theory to sort of enhance that real world educational outcomes. We are all going to explore ChatGPT, and we're also going to explore the tools that you selected your preference for, so Copilot, I beg your pardon, and Gemini, Google. So this is an interactive webinar, so it's great. I know we've got mics that work, so as part of that interaction in breakout rooms, you'll be able to interact with Ruby and Gray as they go through the session. So I'm now going to hand the floor over to Gray and Ruby to introduce themselves and to run the session. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Tracy. Yeah, hi, everyone. Really excited about today. I'm looking forward to this. My name's Gray. I'm one of the innovation managers in the innovation and investments team here at NTFE, and I currently look after all things AI and tech for the innovation team, and I'm joined by Ruby as well.
Yeah, hi, I'm Ruby. I work in the assessment solutions department, and I've been working with Gray for a long time, looking at AI. Have I got control of it?
Yes.
Brilliant. Okay, so we're looking today at large language model prompting. Now, prompting means to give clear instructions to your large language model. So when I'm talking about large language model, I mean anything like Copilot, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, and it's about giving clear instructions to the tool and help it to respond with useful information or complete a task that you are wanting AI to complete. It's coming up with the proper question and proper prompt to get what you need out of it. By learning about prompting, it helps you to sort of minimize hallucinations, so those kind of lies or made up things that that the model can come up with. And it's trained, the large language models are trained on internet data, so by perfecting your prompt technique, if you like, it helps to minimize that kind of conflict that you might get from internet data as well. So why learn about prompting? Well, prompting is an essential part of digital literacy. In the way that we many years ago learned about how to use Google and how to search kind of in a internet search engine, now digital literacy is about learning to prompt well and working with AI effectively. So this presentation is going to look at kind of recent research that's shown how to prompt to improve the output that you get. So it can improve your accuracy, the creativity and clarity in what you get back from an AI, a large language model. So yeah, we're going to look at evidence-informed practice to help you improve kind of what you might already put into the large language model. So I'm going to hand over to Gray, who's just going to do a little recap about block prompting. This is a talk we did a few months ago, and you can watch the full talk, which is about 15 minutes or so, on YouTube. That link's just there for you. Yeah.
Thanks, Ruby. Okay, so yeah, as Ruby said, we thought we'd just start off with a really quick recap of a previous session, because we really want to build on that today and sort of get into much more detail. For some reason, Ruby, I can't take control, so you're going to have to forward the slides on if you don't mind.
It's fine.
So Ruby and I did a session called Block and Chat Prompting a few months ago. Block prompting is a kind of large set of text that you might give the generative AI tool to carry out what you want. And within that large block of text, we have various elements. So we obviously set the AI tool away with a task. We give it a context so that it knows where in its large language model to narrow down to in terms of the topics and areas that we're talking about. We give it some references. So for example, that might be previous examples or something to kind of hook onto, so it knows the kind of style, the kind of format and the kind of output that we want. And then finally, we give it some instructions as to how we want it to carry out the task, what we want our output to look like. It would be unusual to get this right first time. So it's an iterative process that you'll build on. And one thing that we like to say about block prompts is that you can come back to them time and time again when you're doing a same or similar task, and you can build up and refine them over time. In particular, how you set the task out and how you instruct the tool to carry that task out are things that you'll probably refine, add to, and build up over time. And it might be that it's not just you doing that on your own. It might be that you're doing it from a team point of view. So you might have a team block prompt library, and people in that team are all chipping in, if you like, to that refinement. A block prompt tries to kind of get the generative AI tool to understand your whole activity at once. So you normally split up into lots of different tasks. And we expect the generative AI tool to go through those tasks kind of one at a time. And what we normally say is that task one, rather than being a usable output that you want the tool to do for you, task one is about you understanding that the tool is in the right space, is in the right area, and secondly, focusing the tool into that area. So it's kind of got two functions to it, but neither of which are to give you a usable output. It's almost like to check understanding and to sort of narrow that focus. So then essentially, so whatever you decide for task one that's the purpose of it, and then task two, or however many you have, then become, this is what I want you to do, this is the output that I want, this is the order I want you to do it in that kind of layout. Okay, so here's an example of block prompting. You can just bring the whole thing up. So you can see there, you might start chatting with a genAI tool and you say, okay, I want a paragraph about assessment validity, and off you go, and you're going to find that what you get is nothing like what you want initially, and you have to kind of continually chat with the tool and continually prompt it to get somewhere near what you want. The idea with block prompting is you try and fast track that a bit, and so you can see that we've got a task, we've got the context, so this is why we're doing it, we've got a reference, we're giving the tool some kind of link to, this is the kind of thing we want. Like I said before, it could be an example, or on the screen there we've got a definition, and then we've got some admittedly here quite brief instructions, but in my experience it's the instructions bit that often get added to fairly quickly over time when you get your first output and you think, actually that's close, but I want it to do like this, or I don't want it to do that, and then you can start adding instructions in. Obviously evaluate and iterate on that, and from it's quite useful to think of generative AI tools as kind of really sort of simple children who don't have kind of the all the experience of the world that we have, and so we've got to be really clear about how we go about prompting it. So for example, it says on the screen, let's think about someone that doesn't understand assessment. How do we then get that across in terms of explaining, even what assessment is or what the purpose of assessment is? Okay, the purpose here might be, it might be a particular type of assessment. Well, we might need to define that. We might need to give it a reference for that thing. We kind of assume that the tool knows nothing. And so everything it knows comes from the prompting that we give it, or at least the prompting that we give it, it knows where to look in its large language model to get the information. Okay, so in the chat, I've put the links to three of the tools that, or the three tools that we thought we would use today. We chose these tools just because these are likely what you have access to. So if you're a Microsoft organization, you'll have access to the web version of Microsoft Copilot, which is now called Copilot Chat. So that's the first link on there. If you're a Google organization, you'll have access to Gemini. In fact, that is open to anybody, But if you're a Google organization, then you'll be logged in to the Gemini app once you get there. And then the middle option is kind of the popular option. It was obviously the first generative AI tool that came out to the public with ChatGPT. And you can have a free account on ChatGPT, and anyone obviously can get that. It's just a web tool. So what I would like you to do is choose one of those tools. It doesn't matter which one right now. You can change this during the session. Choose one of the tools, and we've got a very, well, a non-block prompt on the bottom there. It says, write a lesson plan for college students, sorry, on photosynthesis. And what we want to do is to start using the block prompt methodology, those 4 elements, to try and to turn that idea into a block prompt. So that's your turn. We'll be here, but I'd like you to have a go on the tool. Tell us in the chat how it's working. If anyone's brave enough to put their block prompt as an example, we can see it, then that would be amazing. And we'll take it from there. So you've got a few minutes to try and write this block prompt in a genAI tool. Press send and see what happens. Helen saying she wants to know about photosynthesis. I think actually, Helen, I don't think you need to necessarily know, but what you do need to know a little bit is about your students. In terms of writing a lesson plan, you need to give the tool really good context for, okay, what students are you writing for? What's their age, their level? If you can write anything about previous learning, I realize you'll be making this up for the point of the exercise, but that's the key here. Thanks for posting that, Helen. What's interesting for me is, more than looking at the output, is the fact that you immediately knew that some elements were missing. So what did you say? You asked for a starter, plenary, 5-question, multiple choice, etc. Those things, you have a choice now. You can make them part of your block prompt, and so they're there forever. And you don't have to remember to do that again, or you don't have to follow up on a chat. You can have, and in your instructions or in a task, you can say, this is task 1, summarize photosynthesis, for example. Task 2, I want a lesson plan. Here are the elements I want. Task 3, I want 5 multiple choice questions. And then maybe in your instructions, you say, all of my lessons should have a starter and plenary. And then that's saved then for the future.
Hello, can I?
I was going to say, we've got a question from Abiola. Hi, Abiola.
Yeah. Are we meant to put the question, the task on the chat, or because I have I asked the Gemini to. This is my question. It's on the chat, and he gave me like a slide of things. So, do you want me to put that in the chat?
So I think more just put the prompt in. So it's more about what did you write, and did you like that? You know, what you got back, was it what you wanted? Is that what you would expect? Or just have a look at the output. So more what you wrote would be nice to see. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so this is what I wrote about health and social care, focusing on infection, and it did give me valid, I would say, information. There's a lot of bullet points, which I can then maybe put as part of the instruction to not add bullet point, or maybe and then also subtitles. You know, sometimes it brings out a lot of subtitles. I can put that in the instruction not to, then ask it to redo the whole process.
Yeah, for sure, Abiola. And that's the point of this block prompt methodology, is that very, very quickly you realize, actually, I don't like that format. I want a particular format, but we haven't put that in the prompt yet, so we can't expect the tool to do it. But once we have put it in the prompt, we can definitely expect it to do it, and it will do it every time. So in those instructions, you start adding to those instructions now what it is you want. What, you know, do you want subtitles or not? Do you want bullet points or not? You know, how is it you want it? I noticed, Francesca, you've said about UK college students rather than US. So maybe in your context, you have a sentence that explains about your educational setting. You know, this is the setting that I work in. This is the age groups that I'm working with. I'm working on this particular qualification. The more context you can give it, the better. And again, once you've done that once, you can come back to your prompt library and you've already got that. It's a case of cutting and pasting most of that prompt to use it again, but obviously maybe slightly changing either the task or slightly changing the context, so you get whatever the output is you want this time around. Yeah, so Valerie, exactly the same point. If you're in A-level biology, let's put that in the task. If that isn't what you wanted and you wanted a lower level, then let's put that in.
So I'm just looking at the chat. This is quite a good one that's come back. So it's Gemma's. So create a 90-minute lesson. So she's clarified the timing that she wants based on GCSE biology lesson plan. And then it's include title. So 3 to 4 learning objectives, timings, materials needed, brief introduction, then an activity, and then 1 interactive quick assessment method, and then a wrap-up summary, an optional homework or extension. So I felt like that was quite detailed, and it gave exactly what she wanted from that lesson. I feel like that would return probably something quite good.
Yeah, I think so. And then the only thing I would add to that, Gemma, is maybe start to think about the instructions that you want. So for example, we may as well cover this off at the beginning. You always want to say use UK English spelling and grammar, because otherwise you'll get those Z's all over your output that you have to go and change to S's. So you know, we always want to do that. So that's a you know, standard instruction. But then, as we were saying with Abiola's question, let's think about, okay, the format that we want it in. How is it you do a lesson plan? And you know, what kind of, do you want bullets? Do you want paragraphs? Do you want texts, etc., etc., to get your point across? Maybe you always want an image to go with this lesson, and that can be one that you use on your PowerPoint or something. So all those things can go in instructions, and like I say, they're then saved for good. Okay, we're going to move on. Thanks so much for your interaction. We're going to move on. I'm glad everyone's got a genAI tool working, which is fantastic. we're going to come back and use these regularly during the session. Okay, so just to summarize then, block prompts, are really our only way of continuous improvement with GenAI tools. And what I mean by that is the tools that we're using at the moment, so the Copilot, Gemini, ChatGPT, and in fact, all of the tools that are out there in their basic form, they don't learn from what you do, okay? When you log off that session and you start a new one the next day or later that day, we're starting again from the point of view of the pre-trained information, the pre-trained language in the model, okay? So in fact, the only way we've got to improve our practice with these primitive GenAI tools that don't learn is to improve our prompting. So we want to build up these prompts over time. We want to improve them. We want to work with colleagues on them, share them, get good practice from colleagues, etc., and improve our use. Those key prompting principles of, for example, using task 1 to zone in on the area and understand that you're in the right place, are really important. I'll tell you a little story. I once gave a GenAI tool a particular job to do, looking at an attachment that I gave it, and I wanted a summary. And the tool and the attachment was an instant to do with an assessment. We don't need to know the details. But the tool completely made up that the attachment was about an incident to do with a fire extinguisher landing on a learner's foot. Now, there was nothing in the attachment about a fire extinguisher. There was nothing about an accident. It was an assessment incident that we were looking at. And so that task 1 is now it's focusing the AI and allowing you to check that we're in the right place. And then it gives you the structure. You've got those 4 elements. It gives you the structure to get started and then build on in the future. Okay, however, it's unlikely that your first output is your best output, okay? So we probably need to follow up a block prompt with some further refinement and prompting, which Ruby's going to talk you through now.
So moving on to chat prompting. So again, this is just the YouTube link if you do want to access it later. So chat prompting, it still includes a lot of the same things. You need to include the same things about like context instructions in a chat prompt, but the difference is here, it's more of a two-way conversation. So rather than creating one block of text with all those things in, I personally find it easier to have more of a two-way conversation. So it's more of a series of like smaller prompts, not just one big one like we just had a go at making. The tasks are taken one at a time in a logical sequence. And it means that the person stays active in the process. So say, for example, I want to generate something, I will think about it a step at a time and ask it only one thing at a time, just so that it produces kind of an output a bit at a time as well. So here's a quick example. This example is sort of taken from that last video. So in this scenario, I generated a question for a practice paper for training, generated a question, and now I've moved on to wanting indicative content. So by that, I mean kind of common answers that might come up for that question. So here's the exam question. So explain one way teachers' activity supports children's understanding of more and less through Piaget's theory of cognitive development. Now I've included 3 forward slashes there. That's just to show the prompt, show the large language model that this next bit is almost separate to the other bit. So it gives a good, like a way to break it up a little bit. Sometimes you might have to use hashtags, but it works in the same way. So 1 way is equal to 2 marks. So I've given a bit of a description of what our marking guidance might look like. And then I've given it an example. So first example answer might be, so here I've just given an example of an answer that I personally had made or liked. So that should hopefully make the large language model come up with something that I wanted. So I've asked it, can you come up with other potential answers to this question? So it has done that. It came up with some answers. You read through it, they're okay. But I realised I liked number 3 and 4. I felt like they were good answers in terms of what I was looking for. So I said, well, I like answer 3 and 4. Can we build some more on that are similar to those, where the answer isn't already in this scenario, and offers an explanation. So I've kind of added a constraint here. I've realised the other answers, so 1, 2 and 5, they must have contained something that was already in the question scenario, or they must not have offered enough explanation. So I've tried to clarify more what I wanted. And then as a result of that, it did give me kind of what I wanted, and those answers are much better. Usually chat prompting, it probably goes on a bit longer. In the full video, it does go on a bit longer, but that's just an example of more of a back and forth between yourself and the large language model. So yeah, I think chat prompting is really good. It ensures that the person remains central to the task. So it means that each bit of a task is sort of perfected each time, and you can perfect that bit before you move on to the next bit. And it stops me getting overwhelmed, because sometimes if you notice when you put in those block prompts, as Abiola said before, absolutely loads of information kind of comes up, and it's almost hard to sift through it because it's quite a lot. But by doing it this way, it's less overwhelming for you in what you get back, but also less overwhelming for the large language model. It knows exactly what you want to focus on. By using a big block prompt, it can sometimes put weighting, like heavier weighting on some parts in comparison to another part, whereas shorter prompts, it already knows what to weight more heavily because you've only put a little thing in. That looks like the same thing. Fantastic. Yeah, so just some general tips from our last session. So as I said, if you want to separate parts of a prompt, you can use like 3 forward slashes, but in Copilot, it's better to use the hashtags. If you use slashes in Copilot, it sort of triggers it to use a file. So yeah, just be aware of that. Be careful about using the word must. So must, for large language models, it puts a lot of emphasis on that sentence. So if you've written, it must have this, it must have that, it puts a lot of weighting on it. So use it, but use it sparingly. I think it's good to have, so the more precise you can be in what you want, the better your output is generally going to be. As Gray had said, always check for your UK spellings, ask it for UK spellings. I sometimes still have a problem if I ask it for that. I still find some Americanized spellings. So I would recommend checking those, and also like separating your tasks. So either by using slashes, hashtags, or separating it. First, I want you to do this. Second, I want you to do this. Third, I want you to do this. So using numbers can be helpful. And then just sort of more generally, so be aware of hallucinations. You might have heard of this term before. So it's more about hallucinations are basically when the large language model produces something, so it comes up with your answers, and it's basically incorrect. And they can be quite convincing. So the hallucination is often like, it sounds real, it sounds legitimate. I don't know if you've seen that example online of where it asks how many R's are in strawberry. You know, if you ask a large language model that, and it really convincingly says 2, this is why, here it is, but there are obviously 3 R's in strawberry. So that's quite a famous example of like a hallucination. Be aware of bias. So large language models are trained on data that is based on westernized, it's trained on internet data, so it's westernized, Americanized. So you're obviously in your output, so what you get back is still going to have that bias attached to it. It's going to be Americanized, it's going to be westernized stuff that you get back. Protect your privacy. So I work for NCFE, so I'm always aware, like, not to put to check your, like, where you work, check their policies, make sure you're not putting in anything that is sensitive data. I generally go by the rule of, if it's available on the internet already, then it's probably okay. So don't put any sensitive details in, you don't want to get into trouble. And always check your outputs. So keep the human in the loop. It's coming up with something really great. It looks really fantastic, but you need to read through, because sometimes it's coming up with things that are not necessarily accurate or what you want or what you need for your task. Yeah, and lastly, this thing's called multimodal prompting. So we've talked largely about putting in text, you know, so your prompts are sort of put text in and you get out what you want. But large language models have increased in kind of ability over the last few years. you can now kind of use different things to prompt. So for example, you could attach a file and use that to prompt. Say, you know, look at this file. This is a good example of a lesson plan. I want a similar lesson plan on something else. Or you can ask it for sort of code. You can ask it, you could upload videos, upload photos. For example, recently I used it to make a homemade card for my mum for her anniversary. So I uploaded a photograph of her, and then I asked it to make her into a cartoon version so I could copy it easier. So I had like a nice homemade card, but it was like a cartoonized version. You know, you can do things like, you know, take a picture of what's in your fridge and, you know, design me a meal. So there's different ways you can communicate and talk with your large language model. It is limited based on perhaps, so at the moment I've got a paid version of ChatGPT, so I've got less limits. I can upload pictures and files quite easily. Even with free versions, so for example, I don't have a paid subscription to Copilot, but I can still upload files. Usually you can still do it, there's just more limits on it. But yeah, also for work the other day, I was doing something like filling in a table and I wasn't sure what to put in one of these squares of a table. So I took a photograph of the table and I said, can you fill in that last box for me? I was looking for like skills or something. So yeah, there's lots of different things that you could do. So before we move on to advanced prompt techniques, I wondered if anybody had any sort of questions, any queries for me or Gray.
So you're not reading off the chat all the time. I'll put a face and a voice to my question. Obviously, ChatGPT, and I apologize, I don't know if Copilot or Gemini already has this, has the new additional projects. And like you, actually, I'm not sure if it's available on the free, because I'm like you and I have the paid version. But do you find the project functions make it easier for like prompting and like, getting to know you and your voice and things like that, and being able to use the files? How have you found that with prompting, if you've used that function? That is,
I think there's a couple of things that help ChatGPT. One is your profile, so you can add to your profile, and there are things in your profile that you don't need to remember to prompt. So, for example, you say I live in the UK, then you don't need to ask it for UK spellings necessarily. So profile is one thing, and then projects I haven't actually used, but I think they are. You know, I said before that when you log off, your genAI tool forgets everything. I think projects are a way of the genAI tool retaining information. So that is a development that kind of overrides, I guess, that limitation that we talked about before. And so stuff in your project becomes the context. Now, one of the big developments, I guess, over the last couple of years is what's called context window. Context window means when you send a prompt, how big context, how large a context can the tool take in to respond to your prompt? And context windows have got bigger and bigger and bigger. So, you know, the files that you upload, the size of your prompts, and if you've got any additional documentation, text, etc., that you might have in your ChatGPT project, then the context window is getting bigger and then can take all that into account. Having said that, if your project's really big, I think there is still a limit on the context window, so it can't take all of that into account. It has to make a decision on what's the most important bits to take into account in order to answer the prompt. So yes, I think partly it does,
great. Thank
but not fully.
Thank you.
I have a question as well. I think going back to what Rubina mentioned about if you want to kind of add task or parts the task, I think she did 3 lines or something. I usually use commas. Do you think it will have implication that is different from what I'll be intending to have? Because I've never thought of using any other thing apart from commas to add the task. So what do you think the implication will be if I continue to use that as different to what you have just suggested to use?
To be honest, I think commas are probably fine. I still use commas,
okay,
but it's just where if I read the task all together, it's almost like I feel like it could be confusing. So I just used it to separate it so it was clearer. Sometimes I found like, like I gave an example and then I asked for the output. Because they were like two separate things, that's why I use the hashtags or the forward slashes, just to make sure it was clearer. I don't think it will matter if you use commas as long as it's clear. I think, and sometimes if you look at the output, you can tell if the large language model has become confused or mixed things together. Then you might think, oh, I need something else to show it separate, or you might put in a bit at a time. So I think it's fine that you use a comma.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Is there any others in the chat? Any questions?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, cool. So let's move on to some, I've called it advanced prompt techniques. They're still very easy to grasp. This is based on sort of more recent research. I've looked through some literature just to see what the new prompt techniques were about. So yeah, we're going to look at sort of 3 core techniques and we'll explore them, and you'll have an opportunity to have a try out of them. And hopefully it will get you to think more deeply about kind of how to prompt. So the first one is called Chain of Thought. You might have heard of this. It's by Wee et al. 2022. If you want to read about these techniques, at the end I've got a page of references with the papers sort of attached so you can read more in detail about them. So Chain of Thought involves prompting the model to reason step by step. So sometimes when you ask the large language model something, it throws out an answer, but you're not really sure how it's got there. So by asking it to reason step by step, it improves the accuracy, it encourages the model to think aloud before answering, and you can check the legitimacy of what it's saying. It's kind of similar to, like a maths teacher when they used to ask you, how did you get to your answer? What was the working out? And then you can see if you agreed with it, if it was the correct approach that they were taking. The paper sort of showed that it reduced hallucinations, it improved kind of complex reasoning. And I think it does help that same thing of keeping the human in the loop, so keeping you engaged. And it was found to be sort of pretty helpful in a range of situations. So what I've got here is a prompt without using chain of thought. So for example, I've written, write a short training outline for new teachers. And this was the output here on the left-hand side. It's still pretty good. It's thrown out something. It was relevant. I'm sure it was something I could work with. But it is still maybe a bit generic. It's got no reasoning, no logic, and there's no like adaptation to what you might need. So I'll show you sort of how I improved it. So I encouraged the model to think step by step. I've added numbers in. So when you think about training or designing a training thing, you might think, what do new teachers often struggle with? Or what's that trainee likely to struggle with? So that's the first part I've asked it. Then I want it to do something second. So what knowledge or skills would help them out most in their first term? And then based on that, create a short training outline with brief descriptions for each section. So it's more step by step, and you can see, so it does the first one, and you can sort of read through that. So it's got the common struggles. Then it comes up with the most valuable knowledge and skills for their first term. And then based on that, then they do the final output, which is sort of a training outline. And I felt like it was more tailored, a bit more in depth. So it's split the whole thing into sub-problems. They solve each one at a time, and then it solves the main problem. So it's an improvement on kind of what we got first. So yeah, it's just about sort of step by step, looking at the reasoning. So I want you to have a go. So I've written same kind of thing. So this was my example. So write a short training outline for new teachers. This is how I changed it. So your turn. So I've given an example of what you might use. So this is just a simple prompt: design a wellbeing session for school staff, which lasts 1 hour. So yeah, just try and add a bit more to it. See if you can incorporate the idea of chain of thought into that prompt. I'll give you sort of 5 minutes or so. So do the same thing, turn your mic off, your camera off, and just have a go. And then you can put what you put into the chat and see if you got anything better out, and just have a play with it, see what you find. And then obviously me and Gray are here for questions if you've got any. It definitely is harder. But it's about kind of keeping that human in the loop. If you had to design that session for staff, which we would have done before we had AI, then you would think about the individual steps. So it's about making that explicit for the model. Helen says, I like the prompts it gives you. Why, what have you put in? Have you said, improve this prompt to include chain of thought? I mean, you could always do that, I guess.
People who know me will laugh because what I've asked it to do is create a step-by-step guide for artistic or synchronized swimming. Now,
Okay.
obviously, that's a very niche thing, but at the end of the first step-by-step guide, it said, do you want the printable version, but or do you want visual diagrams to show it? I was like, yes, I want visual diagrams. What a great idea. So yes, I've gone down that route to see what it does next.
Okay, nice.
Just checking that they're right, because if you don't know the subject, you don't know if the pictures are right or the steps are right, do you?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
it. It's about tapping into that specific knowledge. So you can put something general in, but what you get back is general. But if you put something more specific in because you know about it, then it definitely is better. Yeah, so that's a good one, Francesca. So I've just looked at Francesca. So she's asked it to think step by step. What wellbeing session might teachers in a UK school need? So you've added sort of a bit of context there about it's a UK school, which is good. You've thought about what that first step that you would think about. Then what resources might UK school teachers have access to? Another thing you would consider. Good. And then based on this, create a 1 hour wellbeing session for UK teachers to take place during summer term, provide brief outline. I think it's really good. I think that's a good prompt, and I bet you would get something quite positive out of that. Design a wellbeing session for teachers, last 1 hour. Good. So think of the wellbeing issues that teachers might encounter. What are the various options that you can suggest to address this?
And don't forget, as you go through the kind of chain, you can take control of some of the decision making. So I'm just looking at Francesca's number 2. What resources might teachers have access to? It might give you a list, but then you can say, okay, my teachers have access to number 1, 2, and 4, or to this, and that, and then the rest of your output is, will be around that particular resource. That so you're not kind of wasting, you're not getting unusable outputs at the end. You're sort of narrowing down.
Oh my goodness. I'm just going to take my cat out. It keeps entering. We've got some good ideas. So I think it sounds like people have generally got the gist. When I came up with it, my improvements were similar. So I sort of said, begin by identifying common wellbeing challenges. And then I could check, is that definitely whether or not I agreed with those challenges. Then I asked it to suggest a range of activities and then explain why each is appropriate. So I looked at kind of what wellbeing challenges were there, which I think definitely helped. I'm gonna move forward, unless anyone's got any questions about chain of thought. So the next one I've got is multipath prompting. So multipath prompting is like like an umbrella term for several prompting strategies that I read about. So they all sort of shared a key idea. So it's about getting the model to think in kind of different ways. So you're asking it to explore more than one answer, and then you're asking it to choose and refine the best one. So this is a good technique for encouraging more diverse thinking from the model, and it reduces kind of bias from a single perspective. So you're asking the model itself, like the large language model, to access like different reasoning paths. I'm not sure how I've got to there. And then you're asking it to kind of refine what it comes up with. So lots of different responses. You ask it to refine it, and then you can ask it whether to choose to make final decision on the question. So you can either choose, so you can ask it to interact with like this, the most popular or the most consistent answer. So for example, you get your list of answers or ideas and you'll say, okay, based on what's been generated, pick the most popular or pick the most consistent. Or you could ask for it to pick the most effective. So that would be called ensemble refinement, which means more like you're asking them to combine all of the answers it gave to come up with the best kind of answer. So it's a bit like, so one idea is sort of looking at it from like a self-consistency refinement is more like you're asking 10 people what restaurant to pick. And then whichever one comes up most, like the most popular, that would be what your final decision was. So you'd pick the one which comes up most frequently. So you're trusting the most consistent answer. But ensemble refinement, part of the same sort of multipath thinking is more like asking 10 people to think in different ways. So for example, if you were still picking a restaurant, you might say, okay, we've got 10 different people. I want, person number 1 to think as a foodie. I want person number 2 to think as someone on a budget. I want person 3 to think about if you're a parent with a child. And then you're asking it to combine all the perspectives from all those different people to make a more richer and more balanced choice. So there's like a couple of different ways that you're getting the large language model to choose. So here's an example. So this is without. So what's a good way to introduce the concept of fair testing to level 1 learners? Again, it's produced something relatively good. But it's quite surface level. And it does actually automatically come up with a few different ideas, but there's no like justification or understanding as to why they've plucked those ideas. To take it a bit further, you can do something more like this. So suggest 3 different ways to introduce the concept of fair testing, and use a different teaching method for each to ensure that you're getting like a range of answers. And then based on those responses, identify which approach is likely to be the most effective and explain why. So that's more of a ensemble refinement. So it's more like look at all those and look at which would be most effective, or combine them all and come up with an answer. So it forces kind of diverse reasoning paths, asking for different ways. The other way you could do it is you could also just type in what we originally had. So what's a good way to introduce this concept of fair testing? And then you could ask them to try again, try again, try again. So you can get repeated responses each time. And then you could do that manually. So you'll look through the list and decide, okay, which of these ideas are good. So it's more like an idea generation kind of thing. So you could decide, you could also add a prompt at the end to say, okay, decide on the best or the most frequent answer, what should be done. Or you could ask it to combine them all and see what was the best answer. So when I put in one of those prompts, this is just like a little snapshot of what I got back. So it gave me 3 different ideas. This was just one of them. And then at the end, it comes up with the most effective approach. And then you can read that and then decide for yourself, is this the most effective approach? Is that what I want? But yeah, it just allows for that more sort of idea generation. Another example is, so describe a way to improve student behaviour policies in a college. I've given it a tiny bit of context for like 16 to 18-year-olds. Again, it came up with something fairly useful, but still quite surface level. But I refined it by asking, so list multiple approaches to improve student behaviour, refine each option iteratively, so based on best practice in literature. So I'm asking it to kind of draw on its wider knowledge base and then vote on the most effective strategy for college pupils aged 16 to 18. So by asking it to kind of vote on the most effective strategy, maybe that's more tapping into that self-consistency refinement, which looks at kind of what is the most popular idea. So it gave me something back. It gave me an initial idea, a refined idea, and then sort of the final most effective strategy. So there's lots of different ways you can use multipath prompting. I've given some examples of like how you would prompt here. So give me 3 different ways. So that allows for more sort of varied thinking from the model. You might ask, pick the most popular and frequent themes, which allows for like, again, just like more varied thinking. Which is the most effective one and explain why. So it's encouraging the model to evaluate and kind of forces like a reasoning, or take the most consistent ideas and combine them. So yeah, just allows for that extra refinement. So quick 5 minutes just to have a quick go. So improve this using multipath prompting. So this is just an example of what you could improve. So what's a good way to teach a new topic to learners in a vocational course? See if you can try and improve that. You can use some of those prompts to kind of help you see how you go.
What, the pen and paper, Ruby? What are those? Do they still exist?
Well, I guess to practice just trying the prompt, right? You could just try, like, if your internet's gone, what else can you do, right?
Yeah.
It's pen and paper it. That old thing. Still useful.
Pretty sure it's in the cupboard with my abacus somewhere.
Okay, so a good idea from Helen. So she said, what's a good way to teach a new topic to learners on a hairdressing course? Good, so she's added additional context. Then added this, some learners have extensive experience, some have none. One learner has a visual impairment and one is unmotivated. She got a very motivational reply. So yeah, AI models are generally, they're often quite positive with things you put in. Tracy's got using evidence, consider the most consistent ideas and combine them. Great. So she's used the self-consistency kind of refinement, ways to engage learners with maths in the education and early T-level. Gemma's got, give me 3 approaches to teaching learning theory to level 3 T-level learners and early years pathway. Design them to promote engagement, deepen understanding, support development of practical skills aligned with technical qualifications. Use evidence-based literature to give rationale for your choices. So more of an ensemble refinement. That's good. They're really good examples. I'm just aware of time and I have taken up more time than I was perhaps entitled to. So I'm going to move us on. There is another technique, but we're just going to skip through. If there's time at the end, we can go back to it. I'm going to hand over to Gray to discuss the different models, Gemini, Copilot and ChatGPT.
Thanks, Ruby. Okay, so I thought it'd be useful just to think about what's lying behind these models and what are some of the considerations about why you might choose which one. Now, if you're a Microsoft organization, then choosing Copilot makes sense because you've got access to a licensed version of Copilot. You're logged in, and therefore all your organizational policies, all your organizational IT use kind of rules and regulations, etc., all apply when you're logged into Copilot. The same applies to Gemini. So if you're a Google organization, using Google as your infrastructure, then the same thing applies. So it makes sense to use Gemini. However, we've also got ChatGPT. There's a free version, there's a paid for version. So there's lots of considerations, isn't there, about, okay, well, which one should I use? Should I pay for ChatGPT, etc.? So I thought I'd just like work through these different models and just make sure we understand those different considerations. Ruby, could you move us on a slide, please? Okay, so you don't need me to tell you Gemini is owned by Google, ChatGPT is owned by OpenAI, and Copilot is owned by Microsoft. But let's just have a look at a little bit of detail. So Gemini is the first large language model that's built multimodal from, sorry, I can't say that word, multimodal from the ground up. In other words, it's been trained not just on text and then other bits added on to it. It's been trained on Google's YouTube video collection. It's been trained on obviously all the web pages. It's been trained on all those images that Google stores from its web pages. So it's a multimodal first. I've got to stop saying that. Large language model, and so it's not really just a language model. It's an AI model with all these other bits, and that does make a difference. It means that its inputs are more accessible. So if you're using different ways to prompt, using different modes, then you're likely to get a more effective output. And if you're asking for outputs that are not text, so if you're asking for other outputs, then at the moment it's likely to be more effective because it's built into its training. Now Gemini is currently on version 2.5, and I did want to raise the issue of the knowledge cutoff point. So Gemini's knowledge cutoff point is January 25. It's relatively recent, as you can see, compared to the others. Now there's two ways to look at this. One is that in its large language model, Gemini doesn't know anything that happened since February onwards this year. Okay, so if you ask it about, for example, to tell you a little bit about the background to, I don't know, Donald Trump's decision to do what he did in Iran, then it's not going to know what Donald Trump did because it hasn't got that information in its model. Now, Gemini, like others, can use a live search, use a web search to sort of almost teach itself and bring itself up to date. There are some issues with this, though, in that the large language model has gone through extensive pre-training, extensive fine-tuning, and there's a lot of work gone into that. So the knowledge cutoff point up to January 2025, the knowledge in that large language model is better than what you would get out of a live search. If you're using live search, or if your genAI tool is using live search, then firstly, the model's got to decide what to search for based on your prompt. So it's got to get that right. And then, of course, it's going to get a million hits in about a second. And so it needs to decide, well, which one of those live search results, or which ones do I rely on in my context window to then give you the information that you've asked for. So there is absolutely a danger in using live search. It is not as reliable. And so whilst the knowledge cutoff point has less impact than it used to, because genAI models didn't used to have a live search function, so it has less impact, but it still has some impact. And so knowing the knowledge cutoff point is definitely important, and obviously the later the better. So Gemini's approach is built a web app, which you might have been using just now. If not, anyone can use it. You just need a Google account, which is free. It does have integrations into Google Docs and all those Google workspaces, which you would get if you're a Google organization, but you wouldn't get if you're just a free user. And one thing I did want to point out about Gemini is it has a really unique approach in that within Gemini, it has some different pathways, some different experts, if you like. So different ways of approaching the same thing. It's a little bit like Ruby's multipath prompting, but built into the tool. And what it will do in a matter of seconds in the background when you send away a prompt is it will ask its different experts how they would answer your prompt. It will bring those together and it will weight the different experts higher or lower depending on the thing that you're asking it to do. And the idea being is that the blended output, that you get at the end is a mixture of experts approach, with the most expert in that area given the most weighting, but other experts given consideration. So the idea being you get a really well-rounded output. Okay, so that's Gemini. Let's have a quick look at ChatGPT. ChatGPT is definitely a text-first model, but has now become multimodal. And so that is good in that, you know, you can get other outputs, but it was definitely a text-first model. So text is its strength. We're currently on GPT 4.5 when you use ChatGPT. And so the knowledge cutoff point for 4.5 is October 24. That's getting quite a while ago now. Yes, you can turn on Bing search. I don't think it's on by default actually, so you have to enable that and allow it. But you can do that even on the free one. That's fine. Like I said, search though is not quite as consistent and resilient as the model itself. So you are definitely entering into a limitation, if you like, of the model. And ChatGPT's approach is, here's a web app. You basically, you go to it. There is no integrations at the moment into your other documents. You can't ask it to produce a Word document or a PowerPoint or send an email. You have to go obviously and do that separately. Lastly, Copilot. Copilot is also text first because it uses OpenAI's GPT-4o in the background. What Microsoft have done is taken GPT-4o, they've added a load of other elements to it, and one of the really big things it added is Microsoft own what's called GitHub. And if you don't know what GitHub is, it's essentially a library of different computer code. And so by adding all of that additional language into the model training, actually Copilot is really good at doing code or at reviewing code because it's got a huge extra element, if you like, of its library. You can do live search as well on Copilot with the same caveats, and you can see that Copilot knowledge cutoff is now well over a year old, June 2024. So yes, you can do live search and bring that information, up-to-date information into your output, but with the caveat that it is less reliable. The approach that Copilot, the Microsoft have taken, is to produce both the web app, so Copilot Chat, which is maybe what you were using just there, and have a Copilot Pro approach with the integrations into your apps, but that is an extra cost. So the free is just called Copilot Chat. And just to confuse you, if you were using Microsoft Copilot and you didn't have an account, you get something called Copilot Web, which is essentially the same thing, but Microsoft have decided to give all these things different names and make it really confusing for us to follow. Okay, so I hope that was useful. Things like knowledge cutoff points are good to know about, and good to think about when you're asking it to do certain things. And you might want to use just thinking back to the block prompts, if there's a really good reference, there's a really good web page that has information post the knowledge cutoff point, but that you have maybe read before and you think that's a good set of information for my prompt, then you could give it that reference in the prompt. So rather than relying on the tool to do its own search and make its own choices about what it picks, you can then direct it a bit better to something that you know is reliable and valid. Okay, if we go on to the next slide, then we want you to sort of start bringing this together a little bit. Now, I'm really conscious of time, so I think we're going to have 5 minutes for this and then go into breakout rooms. So what I want you to do is think about a useful prompt for your area of work. Okay, it can be anything that you want to do. I want you to think about everything that we talked about so far. We started off with block and chat prompting. We then, Ruby's then talked you through chain of thought and multipath prompting. We didn't get time for multilingual. Maybe we'll, Tracy, follow up with attendees on multilingual prompting afterwards. And what I want you to do is spend 5 minutes building a prompt using the information that you've got so far today on a task that is useful in your work. And then at 3:15, we're going to go into breakout rooms, and I just want to facilitate a conversation in a little bit of a smaller group for 5 minutes or so, 10 minutes maximum, that that we can sort of learn a little bit and share from each other about what's working and what's not working. Okay, so that's your activity. Ruby and I are staying on camera if you've got any questions, but you can feel free to put your cameras off, etc. And then in a 3:15, we'll go into a breakout room and have a discussion about what you found.
Hiya.
Hi.
Well, I'm
Hi,
sorry,
Ruby.
I was using ChatGPT and it's thrown me out, so I'm now having to just retype my question in Copilot, but I think I can remember it, so
That's
it's
all right, don't
okay.
worry. It's more about the prompt, like not necessarily what you got
Yeah,
out, but yeah.
okay.
So does anyone want to either paste in what their prompt was or talk about what they've prompted or something like that? We'll see if we can improve it.
I wanted it to, well, I did do a lesson on finding out how to identify the main points of text, which is the most effective way. And it gave me 3 ways, and I asked it for a reason for why it was the most effective. And it gave me some research and sort of showed me what students get from that particular method. So I thought that was really useful.
Okay, good. So which kind of things have you like included? So like which kind of techniques? So it sounds like you've got some sort of like multi-path prompting about choosing the
Yes.
best or whatever.
I did the multi-path prompting, and then I did the one where it was the umbrella thing where oh no, I didn't use that one with the key theme. I just wanted it to tell me 3 different ways to do it. So is that multi-path prompting?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
It's a way of getting the different sort of answers, and then so after asking it for the 3 different ideas or what you could do it, you could ask it then to which is the most effective way or which is the most popular way. I guess, have you added like your context? Like, have you written like who it was for?
Yeah, so it's disengaged students.
Great. So you've got your kind of context of
and
who
their
that
age
is.
group, so it would be maybe topical. And I did go on to say that it was which was the most effective, and it brought 3 models up, and it said this, and it told me which it thought was the most effective and why, and cited some research.
And would you say like you agreed with its opinion, or were you unhappy with it?
No, what I was sort of torn between 2 models, and its justification for the one that it picked, I actually thought, oh yes, that's really good.
Okay.
Yeah. So because I have got a knowledge of that through the teaching that I've done, and I have taught all the 3 models, and that one, yeah, probably was the best way. So yeah, I agreed with it.
Okay, that's good.
But it didn't just say why. Sorry, I'm rambling on. It was just to say, it said, looking for the main points in the text, it's good to identify what the topic headline is, current themes going through, because, and it said why. So, it's more sort of easier for the student to identify. So I really liked the justification that it gave me as well.
Okay. If you had to improve, is there any improvements that you felt like it needed?
Not yet. I'm really new to it, so I'm just blown away by what it can do at this moment.
Yeah,
I'm like, wow, I didn't even know about this. I wish I was still teaching. Things would have been so much easier.
It'll make a big difference to teaching. Yeah,
but it'll be great for the learning resources and the sessions that we develop. So yeah.
Anyone else want to talk about what they prompted? I'm happy for you to paste it into the chat if you want to, or we have a shy group. It's fine, don't worry. I'm not going to judge you.
I posted about a piece of learning. I'm also learning resources, so I posted about a little, to be honest, an AC medical spec that I'm struggling to think activity for. So sort of I reworded it to avoid any like issues. But I kind of went more for I've forgotten what all the different methods are on. Basically, I tried to do more of like a block prompt but
Okay.
I think because time was ticking and I knew I needed to be able to talk about it, I didn't like do enough. I know it's not detailed enough. So
That's
I'm
all right.
like, that's why I was like sitting quiet, because I was like, and I know it could be a lot better.
It does take time to write a good prompt. Yeah, it's just that I've talked for too long, basically. So if you're wanting to get something out, you can also paste in kind of good examples. So if you've got AC that's already good, that you're like, oh, it should look like this, it's good to sometimes paste in some examples perhaps and just say it should look a bit like this, or it should be able to do this.
Right.
That's one way of sort of improving it. You can ask it, for different. You can ask it for different options or different choices. Pick more the ones that you like, and sort of just ask it. Okay, so these were sort of more on the right lines. Could I have some more from this? Or
Right. And am I right that with, because we NCFA using Copilot, that like it doesn't shove out what I've said into the wider world?
It doesn't shove out, yeah. So it's supposed to be relatively good security. I think
Right.
Gray's going to talk more about security in a bit.
Okay.
But yeah. So yeah, you should be fine.
5 minutes opportunities. We just thought it'd be worth breaking out into a smaller group to give you a chance to. You can use this time to ask questions, but I thought it would be useful to sort of learn a bit from each other about what's worked in some of the messing around today with the different prompt techniques. So I guess I'll open up the floor. Does anyone want to start us off with a comment or a question or something about one of the different prompt techniques that you've been trying out?
I'm finding it really interesting. It's I've just been working on a PowerPoint presentation for a sort of very brief information session. But after this session, I'm going to go back to it and refine it with more prompts, because I think I've done it very, very basically, and there's so much more I could now ask it to do.
Good. Okay. Yeah, that's good. I think one of the when you're prompting, I think I've kind of gone on a bit of a journey myself, from moving away from kind of being able to, essentially bash out something nice and quickly, and it being an efficiency, pure efficiency, time-saving thing to use the tool, into more of a, actually, this can probably give me better quality. I might be able to save time as well, but even if I don't save time, I get better quality by interacting much more with the tools. So whether that's through the multipath, the chat, etc., using a block, but then following up, making sure I follow up on it, and really kind of making me think what I want, or me think about how to ask for it.
Yeah, I think it's going to sort of like clarify my thinking, because I'll come in with from a certain angle, but then running it through say ChatGPT, it's going to bring like a fresh pair of eyes, for want of a better phrase, and some different ideas.
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much for that, Valerie. Has anyone been using Gemini, or have we all been using ChatGPT, or what have we been using today?
I've been using ChatGPT, but I tried Gemini today. Actually, I've been using Gemini in my email with some organizations that I work with, that they use Google, and I quite find that it's very, very like you were talking about the options that it gives. The options will be related to one task, but it will give you multiple kind of options that you can use. Maybe you can soften an email, make it more maybe simpler, or summarize it and everything, which I found that very useful, because I do send out emails and things a lot in my task also. But I tried using it as using all the prompts now. I usually use GPT, but I tried this today, and it's good as well. However, I'm kind of concerned about the cutoff date that you said is only up to January 2024 or
Yeah.
24. Yeah, I think that might be a big problem, especially if you maybe teach historical facts and things like that. That would be a problem.
But of course, it's always a moving target. So it's sometimes hard to pin down the knowledge cutoff, because even sometimes the owners of the models will update them without changing their name. So it is sometimes hard to find out. But one thing I will say is ChatGPT are about to release GPT-5 probably this month. And so that will then have a new knowledge cutoff date, which should probably be 2025 at some point. And so that will then kind of bring it in line with Gemini, or maybe even a bit past. So yeah, it's updating all the time. It's changing really quickly. But yeah, GPT-5 I think is due out in July. Well, it's now July, isn't it? So that won't be long. Okay, we're going to go back into the main room. Sorry, that was much more, much less of a discussion than we thought, because we've taken longer than we thought to work through the different principles and for you to have a go. But there is one last kind of slide to talk about, and then we're going to finish off for the day. So we'll see you back in the main room. Okay, I just wanted to cover off the last couple of points to do with the three different models that we talked about today, and just maybe some of the other considerations. And part of this slide is, to give you some, almost a bit of evidence and a bit of knowledge to talk to people who may be challenging your use of generative AI in the way that you're using it, and maybe you kind of want to push back a little bit. So I want to talk a little bit about security and privacy. I want to talk about usage limits. I want to talk about copyright and IP. Now, I just do need to clarify, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not legally trained. This is information that I guess NCFE have gathered through the various different projects that we've done and pilots and things like that, and use of the models. So yeah, I may be straying. I don't think I'm straying past my expertise, but just to clarify, this isn't necessarily legal advice. Okay, so in terms of privacy and security, I've got some, I've got different information here that tells you about whether we're talking about the free version or the licensed version. So in Gemini, if you're a Google organization using Google Workspace, then your inputs and outputs will not be used to train the model. So great, you're completely okay. Exactly the same if you're a Microsoft organization using Copilot. There is no concern about inputs and outputs from the model finding their way back into future iterations of the LLM and therefore coming out. So privacy is fine. However, if you're using the free Google tool, then that's not the case. You do need to worry about privacy. That isn't guaranteed. And so you need to be much more careful about what you put in. And if you're using ChatGPT, it doesn't matter whether you're using the paid for or the free version, then you have to actually go in, and by default you're not private. So you need to go in and and turn that off. And the way you do that is you click on your initials, you find the option that says train the model, use my information to train the model, and you turn that off. And then that protects you, whether you're free or whether you're paying, doesn't matter. But like I say, by default, that's not on. In terms of usage limits, it's really hard to find information about usage limits, or certainly definitive stuff. So I've put on the screen what I've managed to find and confirm. But like I say, it's a little bit murky. If you were talking about Gemini, then there are no particular, there is a limit on how much you can use Gemini. That applies to whether you're paying for it or not, so whether you're a Google Workspace customer or a free customer. But the problem is it depends on how big your prompts are, how big the attachments are, how big, if there are any, how big the outputs are. If you're asking for images, that uses up loads more of your capacity than text. So essentially what Google say is that they would alert you when you're nearing your limit, and it refreshes, I think, the next day. And so sort of it'll keep you in the picture, but there's no way of sort of keeping track of that until you're getting near the limit. One other thing that's a bit clearer about Google is if you use their research tool, which is an AI agent that carries out research, then you can use that 5 times a month. So that's pretty limited if you use that tool. Although because of the type of work that it does, it's likely that for most people that will be enough, unless you're asking to produce loads of research reports really regularly. Looking at usage limits on ChatGPT, there's a limit on attachments, 512 megabytes. There is a cap on chats, and there is a cap on file uploads. You can see on the screen there. ChatGPT refreshes every 3 hours. So if you're hitting your limits on chats, then you at the most you'll have to wait 3 hours for that to refresh. So it's a bit quicker. And if you pay for ChatGPT, the limits are really hard to nail down. The limits there are limits that exist, but they're much, much higher. And my gut feeling is that most people on a paid for version of ChatGPT won't bump into their limits. It's the limits are more about if you build an application that uses ChatGPT in the background to provide, a service through your application, then you might be channeling loads and loads of users to ChatGPT and you'll hit your limits. But an individual is unlikely to hit their limits. And then lastly, Copilot does not have any chat limits, which is great. So there are, you won't be told that you've hit your limit, but there are limits on images, there are limits on attachments. And in terms of agents to carry out genAI work, I mentioned Google's deep research agent. With Copilot, there are agents in existence, but you don't get them on the free version. You don't get them on Copilot Chat, which is the version that you'll have access to if you've got a normal Microsoft license. You only get them if you pay the extra or an extra £20 a month for Copilot 365, which is a whole nother product that we haven't actually talked much about today. And then the last thing we'll talk about was copyright and IP. Broadly, Google and Microsoft have said that they'll assume responsibility for any IP issues that come out of the training data. So if there's IP issues in the outputs that you use that originate from the training data having some infringement against it that's found in the future, then Google and Microsoft say, don't worry about that. We'll take on that responsibility. We'll take on any issues that arise out of that. OpenAI, ChatGPT haven't said that, but they have very clearly, they do very clearly hand over the IP of any outputs to you for you to then go and use. And then in terms of learner IP, this issue came up in February because the DFE released some guidance saying, before you use anything that a learner has produced, so maybe you're going to ask one of these tools to auto mark a learner's response, in terms of some formative feedback. So DFE said before you do that, you must have permission from the learner to use their IP if that's going to be used to train models. And so what that means is if you're using Google free version, that is an issue. If you're using ChatGPT, that is an issue because they've got that potential to train models. But if you're using Google Workspace or if you're using any of the Copilot tools, then that's not an issue because training doesn't happen out of your inputs and outputs. Okay, I am going to hand over to Tracy to finish us off.
Excellent. So we're right at the end of the hour now. Obviously, there's a few things I want to share. So if you're happy to hold on a minute, that'd be great. And anybody that's like, I've got all day. I don't know about Gray and Ruby, but I've got all day. I do have a few questions that I want answered now. Then absolutely, we'll capture those at the end. Anybody that is in a rush to go off and don't have all your questions answered, I will be copying Ruby and Gray into the follow email I have. So please feel free to follow up with any questions. So I've popped the link in the chat for the feedback form, and we really do value the feedback, because feedback we got from our prompting sort of taster is what helped inform this session. So it's really useful to have that feedback so that we know what we're doing well and what we need to continue to do. What I would also like to advise regarding your digital credentials, because obviously as Participants Day, you are going to get a digital credential. I did mention it in the email, but if you haven't received your digital credential for attending by the end of July, please let me know and I will chase that up for you. So fabulous. I can't move on. The next slide.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. So these are your useful links on AI that we've attached. And then next one is some references and further reading. So we'll send you all these so you can access these links. And then if we move on to our final slide, just to sort of thank everybody very much for attending today's session. I really enjoyed it myself. I always learn something new facilitating these sessions. And if there's any questions, please feel free to share those now, either in chat or unmute your mic as well. Thank you very much.